Hello and welcome back to the tutorial for this reading tracker. In this video I'm going to go through the Bindery page. So this is for all the bookbinders out there who bind fanfiction. It pretty much only exclusively works for binding fanfiction, so if you want to track your binding for other projects like rebinds, it won't really work for that. So to get to this page, obviously we're just clicking on the Bindery link in the navigation side tab, and you will be met with this page here. I will go through my own Bindery page because I think it's a little bit easier to digest what's happening when you see something that's already been filled out. So just to give an overview of what we have on the page, you have your main database up the top here, and this just shows you all the books that you have bound or want to bind. Then we have the exchanges and gifts section here. This shows any exchanges you've been a part of, or like if you've just done a gift for someone or like exchanged with someone. So for example, this AO3 bag exchange was just something I did with a friend. And then this Halloween exchange was like a group exchange we organized a few years ago. Then we have the materials database. This is where you can keep track of all of the materials that you use for your binding projects. And you can track literally everything, like the glue you use, the thread, the board, end bands, ribbon, foil, the ink, everything. I guess that's just if you want to keep track of what you used in different projects. It contributes to like tallying up a total cost for each project. Yeah, but we'll go through that in a minute. We have a shopping list here, so you can tag things that you want to add into a shopping list. You have a wish list for things that you want to potentially buy in the future. And then there's a store directory, so all the stores that you typically purchase from. We have an artist hub over here, and this is to keep track of the artists that you collaborate with for your binds. On the left here, we have just some links to the macros that you can use to do your typesetting, the calculators. I guess I should show it. If you don't already know, I host these calculator tools on my website that can help you determine how big your text box should be or how big your cover board should be. There's two of them. So yeah, that's a link to that. Then we have some binding stats. So this will tick up as you do each bind. I guess, can we go into the year? Yeah. So I've done 18 binds, 14 of those are hardcovers, 4 of those are paperbacks, and I have bound for a total of 4 fandoms. That shows you your top fandom, your top pairing, and then the longest and the shortest fic. And then assuming that you do link up all your materials, you'll have a minimum spend that you've spent on binding and how many you've gifted. And yeah. On the left here, we have bind sizes. I will go into more detail of this, but it's essentially just keeping track of the different bind sizes you do. So every time I do a hardcover, it's always the same dimensions, and I just record that here. And then I've got like a certain size tiny paperback I do. Yeah. The printer hub, this one is a little bit confusing, but there's a few fields you can fill out here, and it will give you a tally of how many books you can bind per like cartridge, toner cartridge, how much it costs, or if you use your printer for like end papers, it calculates like roughly how much it costs per sheet of paper. Yeah, I will go into that in a minute. Okay, so that's pretty much like the overview of everything that we will look at. So to start off, I'm actually going to add in a bind, and we'll kind of work through it together. I'm doing a book bind at the moment that I can see I actually haven't added in yet. So to add a new bind, it's not like other databases where you can sort of add a new page from from here, like directly into the database. We need to add it in from the library itself. The book I am binding is this one here. So we open that up, and I'm just going to go down to the book bind area, and we click this button here to add a new bind. And the reason we do this is because this button is automated to pull in all this data from this page and put it into this new page that it's made. So if we tried to add it in from the other page, it's not going to be able to fill out all the data for us and link things up properly. So once we've created the page, we can just click here to go straight to that project, and then we can start filling it out. Or you can go back to the Bindery page and it'll automatically be put into our to bind tab. So that's just, where is it? This one here. Okay, so you can see already like a few of the details have been pulled in. So I'm still designing the cover art for it, but I'll just drag something in just for the purpose of showing you how it works. So you can pretty much just click and drag any image into there. It does have to be below 5 megabytes, so just keep that in mind. Bound on, we haven't finished binding this yet, so I'm leaving this blank. Now we have the rebind button. This is if you're making another copy of this exact bind. So let's say I've bound this book and then I want to make another copy for a friend. I would click here to add that in, so it can contribute to the stats and everything. There's actually like a little explanation if you hover over it if you forget, because there is another button underneath that looks very similar, and this is if you're doing another design variant of this bind. So you've changed up the cover and you're doing another version of it. As you press this rebind button, this rebind toggle will go up. Then we go down to status. So I have started binding this, so I'm going to change it to currently binding. And at this stage, I've done the typesetting and the text block. I am currently designing the cover. You can see, like, even though we've changed this, our progress is still at 0%. And I will show you how we change that. So we go over to the binding task here. And here we have a list of different tasks that we can do for this book bind. Each one we tick off will progress that progress bar up to 100 points. So they each sort of contribute a different amount depending on like how long they take. So like gluing doesn't take long, so that's like 10 points or something like that. The binding tasks do actually change depending on the format of our bind. So if I was to say I'm doing a paperback bind, you can see there's nothing here regarding like end bands, for example, because typically a paperback wouldn't have end bands. But if I go back and change that to hardcover, it gives me like the full list of tasks. So at this stage, I'm just going to tick off what I have done. I've typeset, print, sewn. Yeah, unfortunately, that's pretty much all I've done. And so now we can see our progress is up to 27%. Okay, so now we go to the print details. For the printer, we need to link to all the printers we've used in this bind. Now I have already filled out these details in the print database, so you may want to go and do that first, or just come back to it later. But for now, first I'm going to pick the printer I used to print the typeset, which I believe was this one here. And for the cover, I'm just going to click back in my browser to go back to where I was. To add a new one, if you already have something here, you'll see this like plus and minus on the side, so you can minus to unlink that, and then to link another one, you either do it all in one go here, or if you're coming back to it, you can click the plus. So I always use my Epson for my end papers, and in this case I'm not doing a dust jacket, which would normally be my Oki as well. but here I've used these printers for my typeset and my end papers. No cover because I'm going to do cloth cover, and there's no dust jacket. The full color pages one is if you're using one of your printers for like a colored insert, which will say in this description here. In this case, I'm not doing that, so I'm going to leave that empty. And then binding info. So we've already put this as hardcover. The bind size, that's that little database on the side that I showed you before with all your dimensions. So for this one, I'm just doing my standard hardcover size format. And you can see the total cost here has already started tallying up. So this is based on the printers that we've linked and the size of the bind. So already it knows how much ink is going to be used for a bind of this size. And it's also using the word count as well to calculate like how many pages roughly it's going to have to print. Sorry if you're seeing like little properties disappear in like my cut edits. Like I've said before, my version of the tracker is slightly outdated, so I'm seeing things in real time that I need to just quickly remove. Okay, but yeah, so we've got the total cost. Then we have the pages. This will naturally stay blank. This will be calculated here. So your approximate pages is 192. This is based on your word count. After you have done your typeset, however, you'll have an idea of exactly how many pages you're going to use, and then in that case you can enter the exact pages here. So in this case, mine is actually 406 pages. This is a much bigger difference than what you probably would ever have, and that's because this is just a script format fic, so the formatting ended up warping the page count like quite a lot. But generally the page count should be pretty similar to the approx pages. But you can see here, as soon as I've entered in a page number, that approx pages property disappears and the total cost changes as well. So it will go up because it's printing more pages. Okay, so exchange, in this case, this is not part of an exchange. This is just for myself, but if it were, you can just click here and link to an existing exchange, or as with any other relation property, you just start typing to create a new page in that exchange database. And then you can do the same and link to someone who you are gifting to, if anyone. For collabs, if I were getting someone else to illustrate the cover art or end paper or whatever, you can link to them here or start typing to create a new entry for them. And then you can drag in any images of theirs that you've used here. So that's pretty much it for the main page. Then we go into the materials tab here. Linking materials, you can do it one of two ways. You can do it here directly, or you can do it in the materials database itself. So I'll just show you both. You can just choose what you want. So the important thing is we're never clicking new page, because clicking new page is going to, well, I guess you can, but just be aware it's going to create a new entry in the materials database. So if you've already created an entry for that material, you want to just click to link existing. The first thing I like to do is link by paper. So the paper I use is the Reflex Sand paper. And I'm just going to flick back here to show you how the total costs will start going up as we link in each of the materials. I'm going to go through to the materials database here because it's a bit easier. So for the cloth, I will be using a black cloth, which I don't have, but let's just use this one here for now. So we want to go to this tab here, and you can link to the fic that you used it for here, and that's how you link it from within the materials database. Both kind of annoying, but I guess at least with the materials database you can make use of the filtering whereas if you're linking from within the bind itself, you kind of just have to remember the name and type it in. HTV, I've tried to organize these by color. It's not super elegant, but it works for now. So I'll be using this one here. And then the foil, that's for like toner foiling. Laminate adhesives, this is the glue that I use. And for the most part, like, you're gonna know or / not care what to remember like what glue you used per bind, but this is what contributes to the total cost. So if you like having that, then it's worth to link everything. This is the board I use. And then there's like a miscellaneous decorative area. This is for like ribbon and end bands. I haven't decided on my end band yet, but let's just go with black. We don't link any of the ink and the toner. This is just linked directly to the printer itself, not to the bookbind. So the bookbind will automatically know what toner you've used based on what printers you've linked. But anyway, here, yeah, we can see our total cost has gone up to $20 for this bind. Okay, so there's our list of all the materials that we have used. We've got our binding tasks, the materials, so I will go through this in a minute, but essentially, like, this cost, the formula for this is like pretty crazy. So this is calculating like how large your bind is, so like how many pages and like physically the dimensions. And then in the materials database, each of these materials have their own dimensions as well. So for example, yeah, you can see it's got an average cost per bind. So for example, like the glue, it knows that I'm not using an entire bottle of glue. It knows to calculate just like the few tablespoons or whatever that I use for each bookbind. Same with like the HTV, it knows to only use a portion of that. Okay, I'm sorry, this is really unprofessional, but again, my outdated tracker has thwarted this tutorial. I've quickly just updated the formula for my total cost, so now it should be accurate. So this is my total cost based on an average bind. This is the total cost based on the actual dimensions of the bind. If I was to change it to let's do like my tiny hardcover, you can see it's like so much cheaper because it's not using as much material. So it automatically knows and calculates all of that. Okay, and so we've got the materials binding task, and then the rebinds tab is just if you have done any rebinds of that same bind, it'll appear there. So that is pretty much how to add a new bookbind in. I will just show you quickly the variants and how that works. So unsphere the stars I have just as an example here. There we go. So like this is an example rebind I've done. This is my original bind, so it's currently version 1, but I have clicked that button to add a new variant, and now that appears here in my variants, and you can see this has a version 2. So let's say I go back to this again and I do a third design and bind that. I can click that here, and then it adds a version 3. The last thing just in this fan binds database to look at is the gallery view. If you want to organize your binds like visually, you can do that here. You just have to make sure you're dragging in a cover picture for each bind. I think Notion's gallery view is a bit ugly because it can't like constrain the window size to the size of the image, so you end up with all this extra white space, but yeah, it is what it is, unfortunately. Then we come down to the exchanges and gifts area. This is where you can just create an entry to track different exchanges. There's also a calendar view where you can view like the view date of exchange, and then there's a location view as well. So if you hover over that, it says green are the binds that you've gifted and purple are binds that you've received, which I guess is blue for some reason. So yeah, I've gifted binds here, and I think there's someone up in Canada here, and then I've received a bind from someone here. So to create a new exchange, you can just do the normal way of clicking new here. I'll just go into one that I have already done. So this is the most recent one I did. You can list a host if you want to, post deadline, reveal deadline. They're just date boxes. You can just select the date that you want. The bind details, so this is where you would like click into this property and link to the book bind that you are binding for this project. Annoyingly, the rebinds live in a separate database, so depending on whether you're doing an original bind, which would be linked here, or if it's like a different rebind variant, they would live in here. The fandom and the pairing, these are automated, pulled in automatically from whatever you have linked in these properties here. The recipient is who is receiving your bind, which in this case I haven't actually set up properly. A wish list, this is if you're doing like a mystery sort of exchange and you're surprising them with a fic. Sometimes they might have like a wish list of ones that they would like, so you can just list them there, and then you can just choose the status of the exchange. So this is in regards to the bind that you are making for the person, and then here you can list in binds that you received from the person. This freaking property is probably the most annoying property for me in the whole this whole project, but essentially you just have to this links to your fanfic database, so you would link to whatever they made for you here, but then if you want it to show up on their little profile, you do actually have to go into that page, and then at the bottom in the bookbind tab you need to link to them here as well. So yeah, that sucks, but it is what it is. And then here you're just linking to the gifter. So if I click on this now, it'll take me to their page. You can fill out their details here. This location is what powers that their location on that map I showed you. And then here would be a tally of all the binds that you have gifted to them as a recipient. And then here are all the binds that they have gifted to you. So our choices is here now because we linked it in through the choices fanfic page. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so that's pretty much how the exchange database works. So next we're just going to skip ahead and go down to the printer hub here. We want to start by adding our first printer. In my case, I already have them all set up. To add a new one for you though, because this is in gallery view, we're just using the new page button here, but I'll just show you how I've set mine up, and I will show you like a couple here so you can see how they differ from each other. So this is my basic black and white toner printer, so I can select that in my option here. In this case, you don't want to add any more options. You do need to just select from what is here. I probably would not change any of the properties in this entire Bindery page because it is a very, very delicate system and very likely you'll just break something. For this printer, I use it exclusively for typesets. You can select as many as you want here, as many as apply, but for me it's just typesets. Materials, here you want to link in all of the toners and inks that you use for this printer. those are created separately in the materials database, and they have their own yield and prices attached to them, which help feed into this printer database. I'll just quickly show you, I suppose, what that looks like. So here, this is how many pages that it is advertised to support. And then this calculates how many buy-ins roughly you'll get from that yield, and then the average cost based on the cost of the toner. So you can actually link however many ink cartridges you like here. So if it's if they have like multiple cartridges or anything like that, you just link them all in there. The password, this is for if your printer requires a password to do updates, you can just record it here, because I never ever have it written down anywhere, and I always have to like pull my printer out from the wall, and it's just stupid. So now I can just read it here. So the size here as well, I don't know why I don't have this filled out, but this is just what size your printer takes. Okay, so that is the basic info. And I guess, as always, just ignore the hidden properties. So the yield here is 3000. This, as you probably would have seen, it's automatically pulled in from the linked toner cartridge that we have attached to this printer. And then below that we have actual typeset yield, which if you read the description, the advertised yield for ink is based on 5% page coverage, but when we're printing something like a book page, it's more close to a 12% page coverage. So this is a formula that uses those values and will generate an actual typeset yield, and based on that value, we've calculated that we can get about 5 book binds from this toner. So if you've ever wondered why it seems that you can never print as many pages as it advertises, that is why. So this is how many books we can print. If we just want to print like full A4 pages, then we can do about 125, and if we were to print full A3 pages, we would get 63. And then we just have a statement here that's generated, and that's what's displayed in our gallery view over here. In this case, the statement will change depending on what we're actually using the printer for. So in this case, because I'm using it for a typeset, this is the most relevant information I want to see. However, if I was using it for end papers as well, it will record a statement so I can see immediately like how many sheets of A3 paper I can print. Yeah, so then below that we have our costs, the total cost of the ink. So whether it's just the one cartridge or multiple, it adds up to a total cost here. And then we just have approximate cost for printing text on an A3 or A4 page, or printing a full color A4 or A3 page. So that's pretty much how you set up a printer. As an example, here's my Oki one that I have for foiling. Really expensive ink, but I'm pretty much printing like equivalent of like $1 per page, so it's fine. In this case, I have left a note here, so even though this is a colored printer, I've only linked the black toner because I only use the black toner, and adding in all of the other really, really expensive colors will hugely impact my costs here. That just does not represent how I use that at all. But yeah, that's that. Okay, so then let's go up to the materials database. I won't add anything new, but I will just show you one that is filled out. So let's do Sizer. This is the HTV that I love using. I don't have a link here, but let's just do a link to Spotlight. Whatever. Okay. that's where you link to the product. You can link to a store here, or you start typing to create a new store within the store directory. The low stock little check mark, if you check that, it will appear in our shopping list down here. And it's organized by store, so I've got a new item that I can pick up from Spotlight next time I go. Then we have the specs listed here. The first one is just a text entry, so just enter like the color, or if it was like laminate, for example, I might enter like glossy or matte. It's gonna change for each type of material you're using because they all have to use these same properties. So just type whatever you think like helps you see what that product is. The type here, you just select that. Your use case, so in this case HTV is used as part of the cover material, or actually probably more accurately a decorative material. The brand is Sizer, you just type that in. The weight, so you could enter like the GSM of paper, the thickness of laminate, that kind of thing. And then the printer one, this is only used with printers, so if you're not filling out an entry for ink or toner, you just ignore that property. Then we come down to the measurements. Now there's a lot of fancy maths happening in the background, but essentially for every material, you can only enter in a measurement into one of these properties. So in this case, for HTV, I've entered in 50 centimeters. More accurately, I do enter in a square. So let's just flick over to this one. So the measurements here, you can enter millimeters, centimeters. I think it does actually tell you, yeah, centimeters, meters, inches, and it automatically like converts everything, so it's fine. So for square, I've done 12 inches by 12 inches. Just hover over the property notes to remind yourself like how to use them. And then units per bind. So this is how much of that material that I on average use for a standard bind. So this is for me just the size of one cover. And even though I've done inches here and centimeters here, it's fine. The maths in the background like automatically calculates all of that. Then we have the cost here. So you just want to enter the cost of the item, and then these details are automatically filled out. So the average cost is $4.17, and that is based on how much of that total size that we're using. And then how many book binds we'll get based on how much we use on average per bind. So for each roll of this HTV I buy, I can make 4 books out of it. We've got a notes section here. You can just type in instructions or whatever you want. And then if you want to drag in like a picture of the item or whatever, you can do that there. This here is just if you want to hide a material, if you don't want to see it in here, but you still want to have it in the database in order to link it to books, or let's just say that you've used it in the past and you're not buying it again. Rather than deleting it, you just hide it, so it will still tally towards those book totals that you've done already, but you don't have to fill up your database with stuff that you don't want anymore. So I'll just give you an example of like some glue. In that case, the volume is in Oz, and I've just entered 50 millimeters that I use per bind. Another example could be end bands. So for end bands, I record that as length because I'm cutting off like lengths of it, and I use about 10 centimeter length per bind. Yeah, so hopefully that kind of gives an idea. There is a specific one for toner. So if we go into the Oki. You'll see here in that printer one, we need to make sure we're linking any ink and toner to the printer that it's used for, and then we enter the yield here as well. For printer paper, we would enter it in sheets. And yeah, there should be like notes like this. Mine, again, out of date, but yours will have like very comprehensive notes. So if you forget anything, just hover over it and it'll explain how to use that property. Okay, then we have the shopping list. This is pretty straightforward. Again, just if you've got that low stock checkbox marked, it'll appear under these little store tabs. Once you've bought it, you can just simply tick that box again and it will disappear. You have your wish list. This is its own separate database from everything else, so you can just enter in some quick details about the product, who recommended it, whatever. And then once you've bought it, if you've bought it, you can add it probably into the materials database. And then we have a store directory. So here you just link to the store's webpage or give their address. You can record a shipping cost if there is any. Then the type is automatically pulled in based on the materials that you've purchased from this store. So the materials that are linked to that store can be seen here. You can see a shopping list of any items that you've been meaning to buy from there, and then any wish list items as well. The artist hub here, so the first property, this just pulls in all the binds that you've used their art for. You can link to their socials here, their use policy, whether or not they allow you to use their art on request or not sure, whatever. And then here, this automatically pulls in all of the art that you have used if you've linked it in the bookbind itself. And then here, there will just be a list of all the binds that you've used their art for. And then the last thing I will show you is just the bind sizes database on the side. It's important that you don't remove the hardcover and the paperback options, which should be there by default for you. You will have a small paperback. You can change that or delete it, and you can add more just with the new page. So if I just go in here, I've recorded the height of the book and the book width, text block overhang, not relevant for a paperback. You just link the format up here, by the way. Then the margins and the guillotine, this is just for your own reference. I like to keep a record of the margins that I set in the typesetting software. And then I also like to keep track, typically, of how much I will guillotine from the top and the bottom. I clearly have no examples, but oh, yeah, okay. But yeah, so once you've filled those out, that means you can link to them every time you're creating a bookbind, and that helps to adjust your total cost. And then, yeah, I mean, we have the binding stats, which is pretty straightforward. You can see how that's all calculated there. The minimum spend is pretty funny. If you do like set everything up properly and link in all your materials, you'll be greeted with the total cost that you've spent. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the Bindery page. In the next video, I'll go over the desk page for the authors. Thank you so much for watching.